Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Bazaar MTG Podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan Medina, and I'm joined with some legacy superstars today. Why don't you guys introduce yourselves?
I don't know about superstar, but I'm Jerry Me. I'm one of the co-hosts of the Leaving a Legacy podcast.
I'm Joe Dyer, and I'm definitely not a superstar, but I am the current columnist for This Week in Legacy on MTG Goldfish.
My name's Steve Hendrickson. I'm a co-host for Thirstercast, and just have to say howdy.
Yeah, definitely.
Howdy.
We were talking about it before we started recording that howdy is actually the more traditionalist and appropriate response. So everyone get your howdies out.
Howdy.
Now, Jerry, did you say you were host of the Leading Legacy podcast? Is that what you said?
Leaving a legacy. I'm not that grandiose. I'm close, but not quite. throw the gauntlet down.
Yeah.
So today we're going to answer the question: is Legacy dead? I've been hearing some chatter. Legacy is dead. Is that true?
That's news to me.
Man, I hope we can answer it because people have been asking me this for the last 10 years, and I'm getting kind of tired of answering that.
Ever since I started playing this format, basically.
Oh man, you guys are so smug. So this is this is the penultimate podcast, which is going to finally answer the question: is Legacy dead? Now, serious takes, not long takes, but in a couple words. How would you answer that question starting the podcast? We'll start in the same way that we did the introductions. Jerry, why don't you start?
I think it's important to kind of just define the variables first, because I think where a lot of this debate and arguments stem from is that people are coming at it from different perspectives. Like, is Legacy dead from the perspective of a hyper competitive Pro Tour GP format? Yeah, fine. I'll see that. I would say that's true, but I don't think Legacy was ever that in the first place. Is Legacy dead as a way for people to enjoy the cards that they love and with the friends that they love hanging out with? Definitely not.
Yeah, I agree with Jerry in that regards. And in the thread this morning that you had posted about that, John, one of our the other esteemed Legacy people out there, Julian from Everyday Eternal, also had a nice comment about that as well, where he said, it's not as binary and black and white as dead or alive. And I think there's, like Jerry said, there's a lot of perspectives on it. And I think Legacy is more alive than dead at this point. I think that people will still play the format and will still enjoy the format, regardless of whether or not we have support from, Star City Games or whether or not we have support from Wizards of the Coast.
Yeah, and in some regards, I would say Legacy is actually growing in areas like content creation.
Whoa. Come on. Let's not get crazy here. Steve, you're next.
I love Legacy. Legacy is my format. It's been what I've always wanted to play. But, I would consider it dead in because people I think are confused. They think of 2012. We had the 2-day opens. It was standard, modern, and then Legacy on the second day. And that was every week. And then we had the little short spout where we were on the actual Pro Tour and then the GPs, because they had the multi-day formats where they were Legacy on the first day for the adults because they they weren't in school, so I guess that's why they put them on Friday. And then Saturday on the weekend the kids got their format and we had some good times. That's gone. But I actually think it's okay, because for it to I think it to die can give it a chance to grow back and get better.
Right.
So that's where I think Legacy's dead. If you think you're gonna get to compete and play like what you got to do 5 years ago, you're crazy. It's gone.
Oh yeah, absolutely. No, I totally agree with that.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's debating from the GP major event standpoint, but to me, that's not the pinnacle of Legacy. So I remember way back in the day for the regional size tournaments, we used to have 40 dual land tournaments, and you would have these 100, 200, 300 person tournaments every month or every other week where you would go and you would play. First place would be a play set of Underground Sea. And Legacy kind of became a victim of its own success there, where when Legacy was getting picked up by Star City Games and seeing a ton of play, and we started seeing dual land prices go through the roof, all these smaller regional tournaments dried up because it just wasn't cost effective anymore. The prizes were too expensive, and we lost a lot of that grassroots tournament scene. And in the last, I would say 2 years, that grassroots tournament scene has really started to come back. And like in that way, I almost think it's a benefit of Star City Games and Grand Prix dropping Legacy, and that we're now having room for these grassroots tournaments to come back. And some people don't like that. That's fine. Other people like it more. Like we said, it kind of depends on your perspective.
So what you're saying is that success killed Legacy.
Kind of.
I mean, I would say
Yes.
that's twisted
Yes,
half,
because
I
of
would say.
because of the reserve list.
Yeah.
Because of the reserve list. Yes.
Whoa,
Yeah,
whoa,
like-
okay. Wait a second. Before we unpack any of that, let's let's go back to the question, because I think that we're hearing that now. If you ask me, hey, is Legacy dead? I would say yes, Legacy is dead, and the reason why is because the format is irrelevant, in my opinion. Now, how do I measure relevance? Right now, I'm not saying it's irrelevant to you guys. Obviously, we have a lot of similar ideas here. A lot of us here love Legacy or enjoy playing Legacy. I used to enjoy it. I haven't played it lately, so I don't know if I enjoy it now. But there was one time where Legacy was my format, And the thing is, in my line of work, Legacy does not move the needle for prices. Okay, so to me, Legacy is irrelevant because if a new deck pops up in Legacy, it's not going to do anything to the prices of cards typically, and it's not relevant for competition. It's not relevant for esports. It's not relevant. So to me, the format has gone to the place. Now, I wrote an article on Cool Stuff Inc. where I talked about this progression of formats where people would start at the standard format, they would move traditionally into modern and then into legacy. And what I've said is that has changed with the introduction of Pioneer. It's standard into Pioneer and then into modern, and legacy has kind of been pushed out to the place where vintage once was. Now, there's a lot of extra stuff that we could talk about around that kind of concept, where does Commander fit in and this kind of stuff. I don't want to unpack that now, but I'll give you a chance to respond to what I'm saying about this irrelevance of the format.
I mean, the way I would address that is like specifically towards Pioneer pushing Legacy out. I think that's definitely Wizards' business perspective, and that's what Wizards wants to happen. But as far as like the reality and how things play out, I don't necessarily agree with that, because at least from my perspective, we never really got a ton of players making the jump from modern to legacy. Don't get me wrong, it happened. Yeah. And whenever there was a bridge deck like Shadow, I'm probably
actually Eldrazi.
Eldrazi was a big one.
When it got banned, they moved over.
Exactly. So when we had those bridge decks, we definitely had those like flashpoints where modern players would make the jump. But the vast majority of legacy players, from my perspective, weren't ever really modern or standard players. They're nostalgia players. They're players coming back to the game and wanting to play with the cards that they played with while they were kids. And I still think that still has some depth to it, because we're still getting new people at our weeklies, who are new to the format, who are like, yeah, I found a bunch of cards in my basement, threw a deck together and wanted to see how I would do.
Yeah. I would think there's three classes of people. There is the nostalgia of the old school guard that's been playing Legacy because they don't want to give up on their dual lands and the old art. There's like different reasons. But then you have the second group, which
I thought all those guys just played mono black Pock.
Hey, that's not funny, Curtis. Curtis played mono
black legends deck.
Yeah.
Hear the name Curtis.
The guy that I'm talking about, Jerry, he had summer basics. He had tabernacles. He had all 4 seasons of factories. So when he was in the correct season, he could play it.
Oh,
wow. He had a playset of each season. So when it was fall, he would just play 4 fall.
Yeah. You're talking about Curtis Frazier, right?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh yeah. He's a monster. He's great.
Yep,
He's a monster. He's got to force spike people with beta Force Spikes because they weren't playing around
Yep.
out of pops. But
Shout out to Curtis.
Oh yeah, big shout out to Curtis. He used to show up at our locals a lot.
Yeah.
And yeah,
but
yeah.
So you got the old guard. Then I think you got the second category, which was the category filled by the grinders, so the SCG grinders or the GP grinders, whatever. But we don't have that category anymore. I would say that category has fallen out because they don't want to play for Chuck E. Cheese wall tickets at their local GP.
Well, yeah, because Star City has dropped that the support, so naturally the grinders. I think that Jerry's underestimating a little bit of that grinder. Whatever you call it, flack or stuff that would come off of when people watched Legacy being played on the Star City circuit. They seen their favorite players play it. It's natural for them to want to make Legacy a goal to get there, to build a deck, to compete in those
because
tournaments.
Noah Walker played a Delver deck. Joe Lissette played the
blue
cards.
I have a friend who got into Legacy solely on the fact that he wanted to play Soldier Stompy because he saw Chantel Campbell play it at the GP. Yeah. And he saw that deck and he was like, I want to play this.
Shout out to her.
That's not very nice. That's not very nice.
What's not nice? Soldier Stompy?
Soldier Stompy.
He still plays it too. So shout out to Justin because he still plays it.
But the third category, I think, of people that we've received were people that were dissatisfied in the other formats because they played Magic, they like Magic, but they don't like Standard at the time because, I don't know, green is greater than all, or Modern sucks because they allowed these cards to, stay in too long. Whatever. So they've moved to Legacy, and I think
where all the cards still exist, like Oko and.
But there's checks.
That
Veil
happened
of Summer and
that actually happened a lot locally during Eldrazi Winter.
Yeah.
Yeah. When during Eldrazi Winter, everybody hated Modern so much. Several people in my local area sold completely out of Modern and bought into Legacy. Right.
So that's where I think our three pools are. The problem is what are we? We've lost the second pool. The grinders are gone. They're gonna play it sometimes for fun on Moto or something like that when it's free because the dual lands aren't 700, 500, 600, whatever they are a piece.
Is that like a force pool then of like the Moto grinders, like the people that are like strictly like Moto players?
So we actually had Tom Hepp on the Leaving a Legacy podcast last night to actually talk about Moto grinders.
Yeah.
And he was saying from his perspective, there's actually more competitive opportunities for Legacy on Moto than there were before.
That's what happened. That's what happened with Vintage. Same thing. So I think like what we're seeing in Legacy is the same thing we saw in Vintage. Like when I got into Vintage, which was, I don't know, maybe 12 years ago now. I don't remember. It was been a long time ago.
What?
12 years ago.
You're old what?
Anyways, when I got into Vintage, it was a very grassroots style of play. There were these tournaments for proxies. You would actually have a tournament for proxies, and you could use those proxies in the tournaments to come. And there would be Mox tournaments and tournaments for Power 9. And I think it's in the same price range because then Moxes were $300, $400. And now we're looking at dual land tournaments, community-driven events, more proxy stuff happening. I feel like it feels a lot like Vintage used to be with the Team Mean Deck Opens and the, Team Serious and all this stuff, all these teams, this Vintage community.
Shout out to Buffalo Chick Dip.
Yeah, baby.
Shout out to $300 Moxes. Can we bring that back?
Shout out to Robert Wilson because that dude is putting on some of the best tournaments, grassroots, full proxy Legacy. He's great.
Okay, let's talk about these tournaments now. Also, let's maybe not so many shout outs. I think we're overdoing the shout outs. How many shout outs is that? Let's get a shout out per minute like situation here. How many have we done?
I could do that, honestly.
No, but so yeah, this is so one of the things that when I say Legacy's dead, or not that I'm trying to stir people up or anything like that on Twitter, but when I say stuff like that to kind of get a feel of the room, one of the things that I hear a lot about is, hey, there's all these tournaments happening, and I'm not sure. I don't know about all these tournaments. So what's the deal with this? Is there like some kind of tournament situation happening? Are people starting to pick up the mantle and trying to replace Star City games and the GP support? No.
I can actually talk to that as a as a TO. Yeah, so there's actually a pretty fierce grassroots scene growing in Legacy right now that is partially actually driven by WotC's reactions. There's been a few people who have reached out to me with basically the sum of their email or message or whatever is, I'm mad as hell. I don't like this. I want to do something about it. I'm starting this. Can you give me some advice? And people are doing that all over the country. There's the Legacy Pit guys down in DC. There's Hackbird over in Arizona, Mox Boarding House up in Seattle. Like there's all these pockets all over the country.
Represent.
That are really coming together and putting these tournaments together. And we're actually talking about maybe getting like a consortium going to like help each other out and organize, maybe sharing buys. It's all still in the process, but
so Legacy players are mad. They're mad at Wizards.
Oh, that's the point I want to bring up later. But yeah, Legacy players are kind of pissed right now. But as far as like grassroots tournament going, they're growing. And even just from my own personal perspective, we run the Leaving a Legacy Open. We do that 4 times a year, about 3 months in between each one. And our attendance is growing.
I've seen that. Is that the one you give the leather playmat out?
So yeah, we've had leather playmats. So usually we do it with like a food drive. So it's a charity event and we have all sorts of raffle prizes. So like people bring in canned goods, each canned good equals a raffle ticket. And
oh wow. Yeah. I've wanted one of those leather playmats for a long time.
I think you're talking about a different series.
I think you're, so
you
ELD is one of our sponsors who gives playmats as like part of the prizes. He's also a local tournament series.
No, it's a Leaving the Legacy playmat though. Is that did they give out those playmats of those series?
Yeah, so we have the Leaving a Legacy playmats. So yes. The short answer is yes.
I'm confused, but it's okay. Go on about the tournaments.
So the tournament is actually growing to the point where actually our next one, we're going to make a 2-day because we've had the, player interest and demand to actually have a 2-day event instead of a 1-day event. So like from our perspective, the tournaments are growing and there's other ones popping up. I think it would be remiss not to mention Jeremy Aronson with his Missouri MTG tournament.
I'm so glad you said that. I was about to say, get Jeremy a shout out.
Jeremy
25K.
Yeah. So and then he's doing a 40K later in the year. Like that's what I love is like, I think it's going to be hilarious if the largest Legacy tournament of the year or the largest Magic tournament of the year ends up being a Legacy tournament for prize pool, just because.
But it won't be for prize pool, right? Like they're going to be like these esport tournaments are going to have more money than the 40K, right?
Are they? I don't really follow any of that arena stuff. I'm not really interested in it.
Well,
I don't like that arena stuff with them computers.
From a GP perspective. Yeah, from a GP perspective, like we're seeing, like I think that's also unfair that people are saying, oh, Legacy GP support's going away. It's like, well, the writing's kind of on the wall for all the formats. Like the last standard GP had 350 players. Like that's sad.
Well, that is true. Let's be honest about Paper Standard is, in my opinion, Paper Standard is dead. That's another topic. This is Legacy dead? Let's not talk about Paper Standard right now.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying from the perspective is like, is it really fair to be like lumping all this hate on Legacy like dead when it's paper Magic in general?
Well, is it hate when these people say Legacy's dead? Is it a hateful thing or is it just like an observation?
There are definitely some hateful people out there. Like I've definitely seen some Twitter messages directed at me and others that say it's like, yeah, Legacy's dead and good riddance. Like
why? Why are they so mad?
I don't know, fear of missing out, I guess. Like it's a format they can't
FOMO?
play, so they don't want. Yeah,
they've been show and tell too much.
Yeah, sorry, I was
waiting for it.
I'll take credit for that. But yeah, no, I guess like they can't play the format, so they don't want anyone else to play the format. Like honestly, I don't know what's going on in the minds.
I don't know either. I've heard the same thing come up with Vintage myself.
It's like, yeah, it's dead, and I'm glad it's dead. It's like, why?
Well,
like,
don't
why are
you guys seek
spiteful?
to find this out? Like, why not find out? Why not try to understand the critics?
Because sometimes they don't want to be they don't want you to try to understand them. They just want to be angry.
Like I was arguing with some guy on Twitter the other day. So like one of the last legacy tournaments was held on Easter Sunday. Like it was actual factual Easter for the GP.
Yeah.
And
I thought that was awful, by the way. But
yeah, thank you.
It was. Yeah.
So I'm saying it's like even though it was on Easter Sunday, legacy players are typically older, have families, have kids of their own, can't take the time off for Easter to go play a card game. And even despite that, we still got 1,000 people show up to play cards. And he's saying, no, you're crazy. Like you got 1,000 people because it's beneficial. It's like, oh, it's a holiday. Like people had it off work. It's like, come on, man. No one is.
People wanted to play Legacy.
Yeah.
Well, why are you arguing with him then?
Man, is this? Should I?
Yeah.
Should I pull up the couch?
Don't feed the trolls, Jerry.
That is my biggest problem in life. That is why I deleted Twitter from my phone. I have a hard time of not feeding the trolls.
Don't feed the trolls.
That's
what I've learned.
I need Medina Freud to give me some counseling.
Oh man!
Hey, same time next week we can do this again.
Yeah.
What's the rate, Medina?
Legacy is alive.
$500 an hour
in the grassroots. So what I'm trying to understand is I'm trying to be fair to those who are criticizing and saying the format is dead, and they feel good about that, because there is a lot of feel bads about the price of Legacy. Legacy is expensive to play in paper. It's unreasonably expensive to play in paper. And so I think a lot of people are happy to say, I don't want to think about that format because I don't want to invest all that money in a Magic format. What do you think about that, Joe Dyer?
Normalize proxies.
Man, I like that idea.
Plain and simple. Just normalize proxies.
Is proxies like someone playing for you? Is that like what we're talking about?
No.
You have a proxy player.
Legacy.
Yeah. If I can have a proxy player, I'm definitely going to go to the 40K.
Yeah, no. So, I mean, that's just the thing for me is, format's expensive. We all know that. Like, we all know that these cards cost a lot of money. We also know that these cards don't cost all that much on Magic Online. Like, if you want to play really want to play Legacy, you can play on Magic Online. And I get that all the time from people where they're like, oh, I don't want to play on Magic Online because I don't like Moto. I don't like the interface. It's like
I want to play with my friends. That's the root of it.
Yeah, and for sure.
That's a good point.
Yeah, and if you want to play with your friends, you don't need to buy those cards. Just proxy it. Like if that's all you're gonna do is play with your friends, just proxy this stuff. It's not that bad.
I said this on the Living Legacy cast last night. I just really wish Wizards would bring back the gold border decks.
Oh man, yeah, right? You're kidding, right?
Like I'm sure like they've said it like falls under reserve list and all that. Can we swear on this, Medina? Can I say
no? You can't swear. We're trying to keep this family friendly to broaden our audience. I forgot to tell you guys that, but I figured you'd all behave.
I want to change it.
I agree with that. The gold border cards were excellent.
Yeah, I've heard the malarkey about it being like reserve list, but I honestly think gold border is like one of the simplest, easiest answers that makes everyone happy, except for whoever the reserve list supporters out there are.
I'm glad you guys are talking about this, because one thing that I'll say is I feel like sometimes it comes off like Legacy players are a little bit
entitled.
Kind of. You gave this snowboard analogy. Now, can you tell me the snowboard analogy? Because it sounds really good, like as an analogy, but it also sounds a little bit like condescending.
It is a little elitist. I mean, that's the problem with all analogies are imperfect in my point of view, but this is an analogy that I've been saying for years. Like we said before, Legacy's been dying for the last 10 years, so I've had 10 years to perfect this analogy.
That also sounds smug, but keep going. Yeah.
We're allowed a little smugness in the face of overwhelming.
Oh, you're allowed to be as smug as you want. You're just going to have to argue with more people on Twitter when this releases. That's all.
It feeds the trolls. But so my snowboarding analogy is Legacy is a lot like snowboarding. You can't go snowboarding in Kansas. There's going to be very limited areas where you can go snowboarding, and snowboarding equipment's very expensive. But there are plenty of people out there who will travel and who will spend the money in order to do what they love. And as long as those people are continuing to travel and spending the money because they love it, then the format's never going to truly die.
For sure. I agree with that.
that does feel a little bit elitist, though, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
It's
What,
like,
as far
hey,
as,
if you
like-
can't
Little bit,
afford
yeah.
if you can't afford a snowboard, okay, just don't worry about it out there in Kansas. Okay.
Well,
The thing
I mean,
is you can't print a snowboard out on a piece of paper.
yeah,
Hold on.
it's not coming from an
can.
elitist point of view.
You
though.
can try.
Like, it's not coming from an elitist point of view. I know people hate that argument, but I like the Brainstorm show, Brainstorm Brewery.
Right.
We used to say it all the time. It's just like, it's, this isn't for everyone. Like, not everything is for everyone. And yeah, that sucks. And if you really want to do it and you can't afford it, like, I'm sorry, I feel for you. Like, I've definitely been in that position myself in areas when I was first getting into the game. It sucks, but it's also just a kind of a fact of life sometimes. And it's not coming from a smugness point of view or an elitist point of view. It's just, if you really want something, you'll make it happen.
What's the price on a deck? Like, what do you think is the price on a deck, John?
What do I think?
Yeah, what do you think is like too expensive compared to like Pioneer versus Modern
Well,
versus
I don't
Legacy?
keep track of dead formats, so I really don't know what the price of the deck
That's not true.
Remember when we talking about
That's not
smugness?
true.
Remember we talking about smugness?
You
Yeah.
played mono blue and Legacy with the 1-mana enchantments that you have to attack and draw a card. So
Yeah.
you play dead cards. You are a dead guy.
is. Well, I play that deck because it's like, I don't know, $50 or something like that.
Right. But like, what's like, because I know some crazy individual that played a $700 Legacy deck and had a very good time. Well, probably it was closer to $800 that I would never have considered a Legacy deck. And I had to read the cards. We were podcasting about it Monday night and talking about Flamekin Harbinger, Smoke
Hey.
Raider.
Guess what I? Yeah. Hey, yeah. Guess what I played?
So a lot of these legacy decks are over $1,000, between $1,000 and $5,000.
Death and Taxes is $890.
Yep.
Just so you know,
Yep.
I can keep doing this. Burns like $300.
So also on top of that, with Astrolabe, deck prices have been trending downward because people need fewer dual lands to actually have a competent mana base.
I'm glad that deck prices are down to $5,000.
They're not $5,000.
You're
Not even
looking
close.
at so like people say, oh, I wish I could afford Legacy. You can get into Legacy
Hey,
for
4-color
50 bucks.
loam. I'm
For
looking
50
at 4-color loam
for
right now.
$50. Yeah, oh yeah, the
Don't
deck
look at
running
Tabernacle.
Tabernacle.
Do not look
Come
at a
on, man.
Tabernacle.
Yeah. You don't look at decks with Tabernacle when you're determining prices.
Okay,
It's
okay.
just-
How about
like-
the Epic Storm TES, $2,900? How about Hogak, $3,135?
It's got
How
underground
is,
season.
wait, hold on. How is Hogak $3,000?
It's got underground seas in it.
Oh, that okay, yeah, that version.
Yeah.
So
The blue version. Yeah.
the thing
Yeah.
is, though, Medina, like every card is legal in Legacy. Like I've sleeved up $20 decks and won my FNM with a $20 deck playing like mono blue Pauper Delver because it works.
That's Medina's deck.
That's
like
my
if,
deck, bro.
yeah, if you want to play
Nice flex,
Legacy,
by the way, also.
Dredge is like $1,000.
yeah, if you want to
Like-
play Legacy and you don't have the funds, like you can do it. Like, not to mention, I've had plenty of people that I've walked through, like having them get set up with show and tell, and they're running Steam vents, and it's still perfectly serviceable because
Yeah.
Emrakul doesn't care that you don't own volcanic islands.
You know what? One thing I will say about the affordability of Legacy, if you do go to a place with a bunch of Legacy players, there's always a player who will loan a deck.
Absolutely.
100%.
Yeah.
I was
so-
just
Except
down
for
in
me.
Tennessee. I was down in Tennessee for business, and Justin Mullins down there, a great guy. He has a Legacy community that he fosters because he has 12 Legacy decks and he loans them out at FNM every week. Like
Yeah.
that's the sort of grassroots stuff that we're talking about. That as long as people like that still exist and are in the wild out there, like this format's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Okay,
I
so
do think
what-
it's like dead. I do think it's dead as far as like it's not going to move money.
Yeah.
Legacy cards are not going to spike because they're good in Legacy.
And
don't
that's
even-
why I started off the podcast
think-
the way I did. It's like, define your perspectives. Like, from what perspective are we talking about Legacy is dead?
Hey, Steve.
So I
will-
guess
I will
it's
mention
true.
brain freeze.
I know, but
Okay,
that was
fair.
just because
Fair.
I will
that's
mention brain freeze. Those went to like $10.
Yeah,
Okay.
Brave
Right.
went from 5 cents to $10 overnight
Yes.
because of a
Yep.
Legacy deck.
Yep.
This is
Right,
true.
but
This is true.
I- still
Foils
think that's
are
nonsense.
like $45 now.
I know I pulled them out of my high tide box that's been collecting dust.
Sell 'em
So-
out.
I think that could be because a bunch of Magic Finance guys did not get the memo. that Legacy's dead.
So, so it's not priced in. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
Okay.
they're still trying to figure that out. They will eventually, but
another thing I'll mention too is like not only that, like brain freeze, but it's because of this new shift in Magic design that 2019 and 2020 design is changing the format. So people are back to paying
better cards.
They're printing better cards. Cards are obviously impacting the format in positive or negative ways.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? What cards are you? I haven't seen any Broco cards come out or anything.
Oh, cards, yeah.
No, there's been nothing that's just like got this. Like, I mean, since the summer, we've been under a veil of just boring design.
Too many puns. Too many puns.
Too many puns. Yeah, but so I mean, that's the thing. Like I think the finance people are probably paying a little bit more attention again because of these new printings that are also impacting these older formats.
Well, I think finance people, you can't take them too seriously. Let's be honest. A lot of times they see something and they just react. Oh, this is just buy it.
They're opportunists.
And so they're not always making the right call.
So could you also say, Medina, that it's also possible that it's just outside your realm of expertise? Like not every Magic finance person is going to be an expert in every set. And, there are definitely people out there that make their MTG finance money off of old school. Like that is a set that you could say is quote unquote dead, but people have made hundreds of thousands of dollars. Like going back to Jeremy, like with he sells a ton of old school cards and he's made a lot of money off of it.
Did you say something was outside of my expertise? I'm still stuck on that.
I thought it
Wow. No, what I will say is that's fair, but if you were to ask me, okay, you have $50,000 and you can buy whatever Magic cards you want to buy. Am I going to buy legacy cards? No, I'm not going to buy legacy cards with that because, again, it's not very investable, right? And when I say legacy cards don't move the market, they don't. They simply don't. Not like Pioneer cards or not like Commander cards.
Well, you want to. I think move your money.
Now, I think it's less that it's not that it's not in my expertise. It's just that it's not worth the chase. It's not worth trying to figure out, what's going to be the brainstorm or what's going to not brainstorm, but the brain freeze. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, your speculation. There's not, the speculation has run its course in Legacy, which is understandable.
Yeah,
a 10-year-old format. There's not much left to speculate on outside.
Right, the cards have matured to the greatest degree that they're going to mature, and if they do move it, a lot of times it's because of other formats. It's because even though the card is played in Legacy is just another leg on the table, right? Yeah,
but to that also same point, I would say it's like, why are you putting $50,000 into a children's card game in the first place? Like,
well, because it's investable because you can take the 50,000 and turn it into more.
Yeah,
it's an unregulated stock market.
I could take that. Yeah, but I could take that 50,000 and I can put it into a biotech and make way more than I ever could off of Magic.
Okay, now that is something that's outside of my expertise.
See, that's what I do as a day job. So like, I've always really kind of not you, Medina. I love you. You're great. You're just this doesn't apply to you.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
I've always kind of just hated the finance side of Magic. So I like for my day job, I work with the stock market and trading. It's like I don't want that in my hobby. Like I've never really been that interested.
So you're smarter than a bunch of these Magic finance guys.
Yeah, man, you should see me grind my teeth. See me grind my teeth when I see some of the theories that some Magic finance people put out with having like no actual understanding of how markets.
Because you do this for a living, so you have some kind of insight.
But he has spec on cards though on your podcast.
Oh no, I definitely have. Don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. Like yes, I hate Magic finance. I hate Magic finance, but I do love money. Don't get me wrong.
Hey, maybe we should look at your track record before you start throwing this.
My track record is actually pretty good. Record's pretty good for Magic. I will say, to my greatest chagrin, despite being a professional investor, that my Magic portfolio has outperformed my stock portfolio on several occasions.
So now you know why you take $50,000 and put it in.
No, I would say
that's not a big amount, by the way.
Yeah,
like you're talking about this Jeremy guy, he puts,
no.
And by the way, also let's be clear. I did not say old school does not move prices. Okay, I said legacy does not move prices. Let's be clear about that.
But hold on, let me finish my point. My point is that like I've always disliked the effect that MTG Finance has had on Legacy because MTG Finance is why the reserve list still exists. Like, do you really think the reserve list would still be in place if it wasn't for the fact that there's this idea that the reserve list is what's propping up Legacy prices? I don't. You know,
Let's pause there because
Yeah.
I think that's a whole nother podcast episode. But
yeah, I don't
would
really want
love
to get.
hear. I would love to hear from the other two guys. Do you think that the reserve list is contributing to the tension that is happening in the Legacy scenario? Let's just put it that way, because there's a lot of things happening, right? There's a discontinuing of support from Star City and from Wizards of the Coast. And there's also this reserve list thing that's the elephant in the room a little bit. What are your thoughts on that? Let's start with Steve this time.
Yeah, I wanted to start with a pun on elephant graveyard, but because your old school comment. But the reserve list is 100% the reason why Legacy can never succeed, just because there always will be a tension on the cards availability. Like when they did GP New Jersey in 2014, I was there. I think Jerry was there too, and they calculated how much percentage of certain reserve list cards were in the room because there was 4,000 people. And you know the market right then and there, like if there was a fire and the whole thing burned down, a ton of reserve list cards were gone. Yeah, that was like so that meant like there's kind of like an artificial barrier of how many people can play because of the reserve list. So that will cause an inflation of card prices that you can never recover. That's like my biggest reason why Legacy kind of is dead, because like the reserve list being what it is means that it can never succeed, because that tension will always be there as long as the reserve list is keeping it at bay.
Okay, what about you, Joe Dyer?
Yeah. I mean, I totally agree with Steve on that point. Like, I mean, the reserve list is a thing that is gonna be constricting on the format. I think you also have to look at what your goal is. With the format, are you just trying to get together with your buds and play some Magic like the old school community does? Are you going to be playing in sanctioned tournaments, that sort of thing? Do you care about playing with people and face to face? Is Magic Online something good for you or not? I come from that standpoint of Magic Online is a good thing for the format because it allows people to play the format, and there's things like rental services and stuff like that that are great for people trying to figure out what they want to play. But I also, I think it's a smart thing to have. I know there are people that don't like Moto for whatever reason. I get it. Like it's not great software, but once you kind of learn the ins and outs of it, it's pretty easy to hop in and play some Legacy.
And if you really want to play Legacy, you have a way. Maybe it's not the prettiest way, but people used to play on Chandelar or whatever. So
Chandelar.
Look at all the nostalgia I just keyed up. But I also want to make a point about the old school stuff. One thing I will say is that you can play lesser versions in old school, which are much cheaper. And so, like, if you play a Chronicles City of Brass, of course, that's a lot cheaper than a Arabian Nights City of Brass, or even like Urnam Djinn, or the green guy who gives Forest Walk to another creature. I don't know if I said the right one. There's a lot of Djinns.
Yeah, no, that was correct.
Yeah. So that one you can get in Chronicles, and so a lot of people, what I've seen in old school is they'll start with the cheapest copy. And then as they start to fall in love with the format, they'll work into the more expensive copies, the alphas, betas, unlimited, or whatnot. And so that's a unique thing for the format that Legacy really doesn't have. You can't buy a cheaper copy of an Ancient Tomb or a cheaper copy of an Underground Sea or something like that.
Well, I mean, you can have Crystal Vein and Underground River.
You can. That's true.
They're just subpar.
Right.
And Ancient Tomb is not reserve list, and it's been reprinted a few times. So
that's the thing is like I don't really.
City of Traders is the real card. Yeah,
I don't want to go too deep on the reserve list stuff, but I will say that old school is a great example of JDM's tome is not on the reserve list, but how much is a beta JDM's tome?
A lot.
How much is a beta lightning bolt? How much is a beta swords to plowshares?
The one I always go to is Birds of Paradise, and like Birds of Paradise has been reprinted 20, 25 times, and beta Birds of Paradise is still $100 card.
Yep.
Like,
beta
it's much more than $100, but yeah.
Yeah, but like there's this perspective that it's the reserve list that's propping prices up, and it's not, but that illusion is just really hard to overcome.
So part of what you have propping up the old school market is collectability.
Yeah.
It's that the fact that all of these cards are dying off, they're being destroyed, they're being lost. It's called attrition, so to speak. Attrition is happening, so the cards become more and more collectible, especially in those older printings like Alpha, Beta, Unlimited. And so that's why I think the money is still there, because of collectability, because people who are collecting those have good paying jobs and can afford to make investments in those things. I think similar stuff is happening with Legacy, but it's not collectability. It's Commander that's holding some of these things up, like Dual Lands, for example.
Yeah. I actually agree with I do agree with that.
The white border Dual Lands. I think the black border Dual Lands will always have the collectability price point.
Yes.
Right. And we don't own black border Dual Lands like you, Jerry. So we also don't snowboard either.
I do.
But,
those are my babies.
I do.
But that's the thing is, like,
right, Steve does.
I don't play with mine.
Wait,
I do.
what are paper magic cards? I don't understand this concept.
real quick before we move to one, I just wanted to make a tangent point about the artificial wall of the reserve list that Steve brought up. Is that I don't have any data behind this, so this is just my conjecture. But
that's his whole podcast, by the way.
That's why people tune in, Medina. Come on, but like. From my perspective, I feel the number of Legacy players out there has pretty much stayed consistent through Legacy's time. Yeah, there's ebbs and flows, but the number of Legacy players in the world, I think, is fairly consistent. What isn't consistent is over that same time frame, that last 10 years, Magic has had explosive growth and explosive numbers of players playing Magic. And in comparison, it feels like Legacy is shrinking. But in reality, it's just Legacy staying constant, and the rest of the community is growing up around the Legacy format.
I agree. I agree.
No, I agree with that.
And there's so also like only so many cards, right? Right. That's like part of it. Because even though like more people have come into the game, cards have disappeared. They've disappeared into collectors' hands. They've disappeared because my dog ate my homework. Whatever. The cards have left. There have never been any more Underground Seas come in to the pool because of the reserve list,
right? And that and that stinks, because I honestly 100% believe if it wasn't for reserve list, Legacy would be hands down the most played format in Magic. Like,
wow, hot takes.
Like, and that's without exaggeration. Like, maybe I'm just like biased. Oh, I'm clearly biased.
Maybe you're just biased coming from the leading Legacy podcast.
But like even people who don't play Legacy or can't afford Legacy or don't have the Legacy scene. Like, I think that also stems when you're talking about like the hate on Twitter and like people who are like glad it's gone, is that there are people who just really, really want to play Legacy and they just can't. And I feel really bad for those people. And I honestly think Legacy is the format that gives you the most room to do what you want and express yourself and really play any deck. And it will naturally be the format that people in Standard, Pioneer, and Modern will want to go to when their format that they usually play is unbearable or unplayable because of the meta. Whereas the Legacy meta, has had.
I'm not sure I agree with that, though. I think Commander is the format where you can express yourself the most, where people go as a Bastion.
What? Kind of stuff. No, I'm not agreeing with you, man.
For multiplayer, but for like one-on-one
competitive is what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah. Commander's very popular, but there's also a ton of people who just can't stand Commander.
Just used to be, not anymore.
Can't stand the four player.
Okay, all right. Let's not. Hey, let's not make the Commander players mad.
No,
definitely not.
That's fine. I'm just saying from like a more competitive standpoint, Legacy is the format that people would be most likely to be drawn to if they want to get that competitive itch and also have the most freedom to play what they want.
I actually think it's like more like, so Legacy is a great format because It rewards you for knowing the rules, playing well, and making the least amount of mistakes, as opposed to like other formats. I think are very much top decks can win and everything else. A lot of times you can go back and look at your legacy, your game, and analyze where you made a mistake. And there's not a lot. I mean, limited I think is also the same way as legacy.
Yeah.
Where like limited and legacy, if you make a mistake, the person who makes the least amount of mistakes basically wins the game. And I don't feel like that way.
Or the person who show and tells first.
That isn't always true.
Hey, your mistake was choosing that deck, Medina. That's not on you.
Yeah. I guess it's true though. I guess if you're playing the show and tell mirror, you got to watch out, right?
Ashen Rider.
The show and tell mirror is actually very skill testing. Don't let anyone tell you.
Don't get it started. Don't get started.
Listen, have I ever told you about the hardest part of the deck? Let me
casting show and tell.
I just throw the fish food in, and the fish they just come and they start eating it up.
Oh, it's bad.
So let's talk about the future of Legacy, the future form of the format. We're talking about, okay, Magic is growing and Legacy is not. So what does that mean? What happens? What's next?
More grassroots stuff.
Yeah, keep on keeping on.
But does that mean it grows, or does that just mean it sustains, or what does it mean?
It's not. We've already discussed. It's not really possible for Legacy to grow the way the rest of Magic has grown. Like Wizards has made sure of that, and that's where a lot of the animosity in the community is coming from. Like the Legacy community knows that this is an easily fixable problem that Wizards just refuses to fix because we don't line up with their business model.
So they're mad. Let's talk about that. You said you want to talk about later. Legacy players are mad at Wizards. Do you speak for all of them?
No, and I'm not necessarily saying that I'm mad, but from there's a lot that goes on behind closed doors. Yeah, there's a lot of public forums and podcasts and Facebook groups and Reddit, but there's also there's a huge Legacy community in Facebook Messenger groups and Discord Messenger groups that are more small cliques, more private, where usually people discuss decks, but also big things like this take place. And there's definitely been a tonal shift, at least from what I've noticed, of people getting kind of pissed off at Wizards. And
what are they going to do about it?
Well, I'm not. So I just want to preface, I don't think this is right. I don't not saying people should do this isn't a moral thing, but I've noticed more and more people are not only being okay with Chinese fakes, but welcoming Chinese fakes with open arms. And
I think that's bad.
And I don't think this is good. I'm not encouraging anyone to do it, but it's very shocking to me. And it tells you a lot about the mood of the community that Legacy players are some of Wizards' oldest, most loyal customers and fans. And they have been playing this game for, a decade, 2 decades, getting close to 3 decades for some of them. And these are the people that are saying, screw you, WotC. If you don't care about me, I don't care about you. Not only am I going to turn a blind eye when it comes to people undermining your business, I'm going to welcome them with open arms.
Mm-hmm.
That is very telling. And it's shocking from a customer service point of view that WotC should probably, I don't know, at least recognize that. That is not a good sign when your oldest player, most loyal customers are encouraging your downfall.
Well, that's capitalism, right? If if you have money and they will not provide you the service that you want to, purchase, then you will go purchase it somewhere else.
So you're talking about black market. Black markets emerge when there's this kind of issue, right?
I mean, you go to McDonald's and McDonald's has got a close sign. You want a hamburger, you're going across the street to Burger King. And that's basically what happens. If someone wants to buy a dual land, but Wizards of the Coast won't sell them one because they won't print new ones, they'll just go across the street to the black market, what I call Burger King, and get that 100-pound C. They're not going to like it as much. It's not as nice. But it's going to do the job. They just want to cast Thoughtseize into Ponder. So,
What else are they doing? Because I've heard people saying stuff like, "I'm not going to buy another Wizards product." Is that kind of happening, or
that's very common, boycotting? And that's what also pisses me off is the argument. It's well, WotC doesn't care about Legacy players because Legacy players don't spend money. That argument pisses me off because it's not true. It's not that legacy players don't have the money or won't spend the money. It's that WotC refuses to give us products that we'll actually give them money for. Like when Eternal Masters was printed, we bought cases of that. I drafted so much Eternal Masters.
The
we
way
would have
you
people
said that,
over.
it made me think of like you're just dumping packs of Eternal Masters on your face. Like,
yes, just so many we bought so much Eternal Masters. We did so many Eternal Masters drafts. When they have things like the Secret Lair with the Bitter Blossoms, I know so many of my legacy friends went out and bought those because they needed the Bitter Blossom for their deck. Like, legacy players will buy these Wizards products. We will happily give Wizards our money. Just Wizards make stuff that we want to buy, for the love of God. Like, that's why I was so pumped. I don't know if you guys saw, but they had the survey go out about the old border promos.
Yeah.
And that's something we've talked about with Gavin on the cast a number of times. Like, the second those come out, like, we're going to buy the hell out of them. And if Wizards ever did get rid of the reserve list, guarantee you, with like, I would put $1 million on it. That would be the highest selling set of all time. Like, that would fly off the shelves. Like,
obviously,
legacy players are old. We have a lot of money for it because we're older and have established jobs compared to other format players, I should say. But we have not. I didn't. All right, that came out way worse than I intended to. Like,
hey, I'm just being your little the little red.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. But like, your average legacy player usually is like 30 to 40, 50 years old, is established in their career, has the spending money compared to like a standard player who's like a high school kid. Like, it's just a fact of the player base. They have the money, they're willing to spend it if WotC would just print stuff that we want to spend it on.
I mean, the last year they printed a lot of cards, and we bought a lot of cards because War of the Spark and
Modern Horizons,
like, and they did, and they sold very well. So, I mean, I don't know. I personally have never understood. Just give me my foil tundras. Just give me my foil. I just want my foil tundras. My whole deck's foil. I've got like 12 foiled legacy decks with them stupid lands. So, but whatever. Like,
yeah, that is true.
I personally think that the reserve list is an abomination and will never. That's why I never think legacy will succeed until it dies. Like, I really want it to die the rest of the way. I want it to die, because that's when prices will drop down and new blood will come in and it can grow again. Like,
so die the rest of the way. What do you mean by that? Like, what is the rest of the way? What does a dead legacy look like?
Like Commander, like 7 years ago, 8 years ago, because like that was great for Commander when people were like, "Man, I spent $27 and bought 5 Commander decks," and it was just like,
Commander was not dead. The Commander was like booming.
Medina.
The prices were
the kitchen
deflated.
table was the home. That was it. Like, that was all Commander was.
You're doing like a philosophical thing about the format.
7 years ago.
I'll tell you what died. EDH died. Okay, Commander.
I'm sorry. So we'll call Legacy something else in the future and say this didn't die, but Legacy did. It's the same thing.
Right.
Like, the format, Commander was dead. It was some grassroots thing, and like 5 people played it and talked about it, including Sheldon Maneri, whatever. But like, that's fine. It's grown.
Hey, I was there, man. I played Commander. I mean, I played EDH.
I agree. But like, it's grown. It dying in those $27 decks made people come into the format.
Right, but Commander didn't see. EDH did not die for Commander. EDH became Commander, and the trajectory was never downward; it was upward, right?
Well, so
the growth trajectory was like
Elder Dragon Highlander was very popular,
right,
a long time ago. It died, and that's when it became. It started picking up, these grassroots and started moving it, and the Wizards caught on, and
Wizards
really cool
came alongside. That's when EDH effectively died, because they started to print Commander only cards, and lots of other things happened. I don't want to get on that topic, and I'm not mad about it either. I'm happy for Commander to be here, and great. But okay, so onward and upward. Legacy, the future of the format. It doesn't grow. More grassroots stuff happened to give people opportunities to play. People find ways to do it in Moto, Magic Online. People find ways to play it with proxies. And the Legacy community remains upset at Wizards of the Coast.
Oh,
I see in the future, like my prediction of like how this would get turned around is the grassroots community, which already exists and is having tournaments, continues on its merry way, just pretty much ignoring WotC for the most part, and
Yes.
proxy tournaments become
Yeah.
more and more popular. And eventually some executive at Hasbro phones up Chris Cox at WotC and says, "Hey, what are you doing? You guys are leaving a ton of money on the table. You have all of these people playing this game. We're not making a cent off of them. What are you guys doing?" Next thing we know, like official WotC proxies or gold border reserve list cards come out again, and WotC decides to capitalize it, because that's what I've never got about this is WotC is just leaving a huge amount of money on the table that they're not capitalizing on. And I think eventually someone's going to wake up to that fact and come up with a way to, get around the reserve list and also get these things that players want into their hands.
Okay. Joe,
Yeah,
what
I
do you
mean-
think?
I think that to what Jerry said too is people are just gonna go. We're just gonna go about our merry way. We're gonna do our own thing. And I think to talk about the anger issues, I think at some point people will just be like, all right, you know what? It's clear, that it's not. They're not gonna support us anymore. That's fine. Let's just move on and let's keep playing this game and let's keep playing this format and let's just find ways to do it. And I think it's a good thing that there's people that are angry about it, because like there's people that are super angry about it are the people that are like, look, I'm gonna do something about it.
Yeah. Angry
know,
people get stuff done. That's why I get so much done.
Like, I know Jeremy, was basically on his way out to retirement, and then SCG announced they were dropping Legacy, and he was like, yep, I'm gonna run big tournaments next year at a loss to myself because I love this format so much.
Now, are people mad at Star City?
Not
Of
less.
course.
I think
Of course.
less at Star City, and I want to point that out because Star City was more upfront
Yes.
about why they were dropping Legacy, and their Legacy was, so it's like, look, we have Legacy a lot more than WotC does at a GP level every year. And I think that's true. They have, classics all the time, like a lot of classics.
Yeah. They have
have
their eternal, I forget what they call it, but they have like their Legacy Vintage big tournament in
Yeah.
Virginia.
Yeah, and then the team events were
Yeah.
also putting a lot of pressure on them. So they were having more events a year than a GP, the GP circuit typically had,
Uh-huh.
and that put a lot of pressure on them for financially, because they couldn't source players for these events because not everybody can make it to every SCG event or
Right,
whatever.
and there is just a smaller audience of Legacy players, right?
Yeah. So basically, the point I'm making is that I think people are less upset at SCG because SCG was upfront and said, "Yeah, this is why we're doing it. We're going to be upfront with you guys. We're going to tell you guys that this is exactly the reason why Ben from SCG made a a really solid post about that whole thing." And I think people are less upset with them because they're like, they're kind of on our side. They want to have Legacy. They just want, there to be availability and cards and stuff like that to be able to do it because they like the format.
Yeah. I mean, people
So-
understand they're a business.
Yeah.
And I think that's also why people are more upset at WotC than Star City Games. Is the perspective against WotC is that a lot of people feel that WotC is doing this on purpose, that WotC is purposely trying to sink Legacy because it draws players away from Standard and from Pioneer, which is WotC's more cash cow. Like WotC would love it if no one ever said the word Legacy ever again.
I don't think that. I personally don't think that's true, but I also think that this
yes,
comes from
like, the truth to that is
Yeah.
is definitely up for debate. I'm just saying this is a perspective that many people in the community have.
I don't think there's much transparency from their end.
Right.
And that's
peop-
part of the reason people are actually
Yeah.
mostly upset. Like
and
that's
people,
mostly the
people,
reason
people
I'm upset.
naturally assume the worst. And when WotC
Right.
transparent doesn't tell us about these things, this is the natural conclusion people come to.
I think if they would just rip the Band-Aid off and just say, hey, we are deciding to not pursue the support of the format at a GP level anymore, for specific reasons, and that we have reasons for that, profitability or whatever, and not some metric about play numbers You know,
That's why everyone was so pissed off. Is
Yeah.
like, we're not doing legacy anymore because the play numbers say that people don't show up to GPs, and then Jtron put together some great data sets basically showing that on every metric, legacy attendance is highest for GPs than any other format. Like,
but I mean, that's because there were only 3 events last year.
Right. And we're not asking for there to be 10 legacy GPs a quarter.
Right.
Like, all we want is one. It's like, you're telling me that you can't, not have that 350 person standard GP. You can't throw us our bone and let us have that one legacy GP that we have shown time and time again.
All right, let's
schedule it
let's
in the
get
worst
Steven.
areas.
Let's get Steven on
go
this.
ahead, Steve.
Yeah, well, Steve.
There's some issues. So I don't think the GPs is really Wizards. I think that's Channel Fireball, and that's, I think Channel Fireball, they want to buy cards.
Wizards chooses the formats of the GP. Channel Fireball doesn't choose which format each GP.
I know Channel Fireball puts that out, but I also know that Channel Fireball is running the events. So I'm pretty sure they probably give some input. And I would definitely say that, if it was just on attendance, that Wizards would want to probably pump that up. But I do think that Channel Fireball, just like Star City, doesn't want Legacy on their tours because Legacy players, as much as we say we buy cards, we don't sell cards.
That's
and
true.
That's what those events are, not to sell cards to players. They are to buy cards from the players so they can restock their online catalogs where they really make a killing. And
we don't make a killing. We don't really make a killing online.
Okay.
Let's be honest. The margins are thin, and
but you want to get the cards, right? You need to
the primary idea about being at a Grand Prix is to buy. It's acquisitions.
Yeah,
much more than it's sales. Sales are whatever.
But the average Legacy player doesn't sell their cards because you can't recover them as easily.
No, and if they do sell cards, they're selling me, brain freezes and stuff that I don't really want.
Oh, I'm not even worried about that. I'm talking about you go to a modern event with a really bad deck like Vile Elementals in modern. We'll play. I'm like, man, this deck's so hot. It's great. I'm gonna go play it, and then I get killed on turn 2 and turn 3 by these other modern decks.
Right.
I'll go take it to the vendor and sell it. Because it's like a $300 or $400 deck. It's probably still a $700 deck. But you sell it, and you take like a $300 loss, and then you can go buy another deck. But you can't do that with a Legacy deck. You will lose a significant portion of your, investment, because that is a larger margin. So I do think that because Legacy players do not sell their cards, it doesn't matter if you have 4,000 people. If they're not selling their cards, then it's a failure for the vendor.
Yeah. And I think that's really where the grassroots tournaments shine. Grassroots tournaments don't care about vendors. When we do the Leaving a Legacy Open, we don't care if we're buying cards. I mean, we're doing it to get people to play the format and to, celebrate the format that we love. We're not doing it for, a purely money-making perspective. And I know Jeremy does the same thing, with his tournaments. Jeremy's goal on his tournaments is to break even. I don't know the name of the person who runs it, but there's also a Legacy tournament in Beijing that's an absolute insane tournament. Orlov, yes.
Yeah.
And
Orlov.
He doesn't.
That event is insane.
He does it just for a straight up loss. He doesn't even care. I get my understanding is he's a very wealthy individual who loves Legacy, and so he throws absolutely insane Legacy tournaments to the point that people are like flying from Europe to Beijing to play in these events because the EV is so high that the plane ticket more than pays for itself.
Yeah. James from Cardboard Live has talked about that event quite a bit. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
But
it's insane.
I do think you can't worry about the GP level's gone. And I would almost rather it really die because I think with it dying, you will have people who love the format that will take it up.
Yeah.
There's a card game. I'm old. I might be the oldest person here right now, but
possibly
there was a card game called Spellfire. It came out just about the same time Magic did. and it died. Wizards acquired it when they acquired TSR, and it died in 1999. And it actually became popular in 2000. It's still being ran today without any support. They're actually making their own cards, designing them, printing them on real paper, probably better paper than
Watsy uses.
and they're distributing them.
So the cards are not coming out like Pringles.
But they're supporting themselves,
right?
Out of the love of the game, because it's a game. It's something you love and have fun and enjoy. And I think propping it up, as long as we're under the artificial stipulation that we want to be recognized, and we have to use real cards and this, that, and the other. I don't even care about sanction. Sanction's stupid to me.
Yep.
There's no buys, and they're even going away now, so good. So like the whole sanctioning thing is silly. So I don't care if you're playing on a piece of paper. Just make it so like it looks like the rest of your piece of paper, and I'm fine. So it's random.
Have proxy standards, and your life will be fine.
Yeah. I mean, on the end of the day, there's only so many cards as long as the reserve list is around.
Yeah, I think that's a good note to wrap up on. There's so many things we unpacked in this podcast. I don't want to beat a dead horse. The whole goal was to say, is Legacy dead? I think that I'm coming away from this with a more, I guess, a more enlightened perspective, right? It may still be irrelevant in my perspective of work as far as moving prices or competitiveness or this kind of thing. But as you guys said, there's a bunch of grassroots stuff happening. Content is maybe growing for Legacy. People are interested in seeing what kind of stuff is happening in the format. And I find all that stuff to be hopeful. So
content is huge.
Yeah, I would say content's growing. So when we started the Leaving Legacy podcast, we were basically the only consistent Legacy podcast out there. Like there was Legacy Breakfast, but they came out with one episode maybe every other month. So when we started, we were basically the only kids on the block, which I think is the only reason why we were successful. People had nowhere else to turn.
Wait. I heard about this other podcast that was weekly that was some crazy talk.
That's right. Hey.
Also crazy talk. Actually, Crazy Talk's one of the reasons why Leaving Legacy started, because we loved Crazy Talk and they stopped coming out with episodes. We're like, well, screw it. We'll do it.
That sounds like crazy talk.
There it is. That's a wrap.
A lot of people have no idea what that's all about.
It's okay. But, it's like they're too young.
Yeah. For the shout out to those who do know what that's about. We appreciate you. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to end with each of you guys giving just a short statement, like something, if there's anything that you left off the table or a point that you wanted to make about the topic. We can start with Jerry and then go to Joe and then to Steve. And then after that, we'll talk about where people can find us and this kind of thing. And we might have to do this again. This was a lot of fun. I think we did a pretty good job of covering the topic. So why don't you start us off?
Yeah, just kind of continuing. I would say for people who are worried and like, is my Legacy deck still going to be useful? And should I sell out? Like, I'm not worried at all, because when I look around and I see all the articles coming out, all the podcasts, there's some great Eternal Durdles, Thirst for Knowledge, the Dead format. Now that I'm naming them all off, I'm going to forget one. I'm going to feel really bad. They're going to message me. It's like, why didn't you say me, dude? So I'm just going to say a blanket all the other Legacy podcasts out there.
Everyday Eternal.
Everyday Eternal.
The Eternal Glory.
Eternal Glory.
Yeah, Eternal Glory. Yeah. Fill in the blank, like the 10 other Legacy podcasts that are out there, compared to like what it was 5 years ago when Legacy was the only game in town. And that's the only reason why people listen to us. But like as long as you're seeing the content come out and people innovating and talking about the format, you don't really need to worry. That is your barometer of the health of the format. And from that perspective, I think Legacy's in a great place.
Yeah, I'm going to echo the same thing. Content, there's lots of people producing content. Again, I made it my personal goal after the end of past year to revive the MTG Goldfish This Week in Legacy, because it had fallen off a little bit. And so my goal with that has always been to provide consistent and quality legacy content, and trying to get more people information, and also trying to shine a light on all these, community grassroots efforts. That's really important to me. So yeah, same thing Jerry said. If you think your, legacy's dead, yeah, it might be, but you're going to still be able to play the game. You're still going to be able to play the format. There's still things for you to do with this format. People are still going to be producing content for it. So,
and that's the biggest difference in my point of view, legacy to vintage, like the health of the formats compared.
Hey.
Like, I know you guys love vintage.
Hey, final point, man. You're making extra final points. That's not fair.
I always sneak in under the
Hey. I also produce weekly consistent vintage content. So
I'll rescind my comment.
I am working double time now.
And you're killing it. The legacy, your legacy series, you're killing it.
Thank you.
It reminds me of Steven. Like, it's
Sean.
amazing.
That's
What
Sean?
I meant. So, yeah, Sean Brown. Yeah,
Sean is my muse. Honest to God, when I got into Legacy, one of the big things that I got me into the format was reading Sean Brown's articles every week, and he was a fantastic guy. Still is. He still plays Legacy, even though he's done with the articles and writing and stuff like that. He's still playing out there in Australia, and I think it's fantastic. And I'm actually friends with him on Facebook, and he's a really nice guy to talk to.
Yeah.
So
props to you, Joe, because writing articles is fantastic.
It's hard.
he reminds me of when I started, it was Drew Levin. Drew Levin was like the big legacy guy, and he was the one who came up with like Gold Digger and a bunch of it was really just
that's true. Drew Levin, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, he was awesome.
And honestly, I have to give really bigger props to Seth and Richard at MTG Goldfish for giving me the opportunity to do this. Because this could be, MTG Goldfish is a well-traveled website. They focus a lot on standard and modern and pioneer and stuff, and they could say hey, we don't want to provide content for these older formats. And Richard's totally on board with it, and so is Seth. And I think that's what I love about it, working for those guys, is that they are really on board with providing this kind of content.
That's awesome of them.
Yeah. So love those guys to death. Big props to them. Steve?
All right, final comment, Steve.
Legacy is dead. Long live Legacy. I want it to die so it'll come back. Because honestly, if you're worried about what your cards are going to be worth tomorrow, you're not playing Legacy. If you're worried about like what your friends think, oh, you play Legacy, then you're not playing Legacy. If you're worried about anything but just sitting down and casting Brainstorm and then cracking a fetch, you're crazy. Stop worrying about all that nonsense. Just sit down and play your card game, enjoy it, make little to no mistakes, and have fun. Because it's not all about show and tell. You just want to have some fun and enjoy yourself. I really, honestly, I do think Legacy should be dead and let it die so you can just enjoy yourselves. Because you can't just be like, this guy, Jonathan Medina, coming on and just saying, oh, hot take, Legacy's dead. Don't worry about that John Medina guy.
I said it's irrelevant, not dead.
What is dead can never die.
All right. Exactly.
How can you kill that which has no life?
I don't know what type Medina is, enchantment or an artifact. I think he's old, but he just drew my Tarmogoyf. So, I do say, just let it die. Long live Legacy. Because I want to have fun. I play with like 12 to 14 people every so often. I enjoy it. I talk to 5 of those people, have become lifelong friends. They are my legacy. There's tons of people that I've met and I've podcasted with. I podcasted with Jerry Me several years ago. I never would have talked to this guy. We
gotta have you back on, by the way.
I've been on a podcast with Jerry Me.
I never would have talked to this guy. The first time I saw him at a GP, he had Monastery Mentor, Narset, and Show and Tell in the same.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
And I was like, okay, that's way to make my deck harder. Gotcha. But it was cool. Like, it was really cool. And like, that's great. I met James Shu. I met the guy who plays Blue Red Delver, and he's also a Miracle player at the same time.
Oh,
Bob Huang?
No,
not
from
Bob.
the Boston area. Starts with an R. This is really killing me.
This is the worst shout out ever.
Oh, no, I'm not. It's really terrible because I know him. He writes articles and everything else, but I've met these people and connected with them.
Yeah.
And it's because of Legacy. I've played other formats. I barely even look at my opponent because I don't need to. It's just it's terrible, but I'm like, oh yeah, congratulations. You spit out your whole hand on turn 1 with Affinity. Great. I'm going to sign my slip and move on and hope I find a better matchup. It's just I just would rather enjoy Legacy. So don't worry about it. Don't worry about if your cards go up or down. Don't worry about if your friends care that you're playing it or not. Don't worry about if it's on Star City's website on the front page that you have to pay for now to get in. Just move on.
Stop treating your deck like your 401k and you'll be much happier.
Yes.
I can't believe that you pandered to the Discord audience with that roast there, Steve.
What are you talking about?
Oh, that was good.
I don't even know what you're talking about.
All right. So why don't you tell these folks where they can find you? I know all of you, by the way, everybody, all of these content links that these guys are about to throw out, I highly endorse them. I really enjoy these guys' content. That's why I had them on the podcast. And you should definitely check it all out. So why don't you start us out, Jerry, and we'll go down the list.
Yeah. So you can find Leaving a Legacy at hipstersofthecoast.com. We come out with new episodes every Friday. Our next guest we're actually going to have is Jeremy Aronson, who is the one running
Awesome
Legacy tournament.
Oh, that'll be a good listen.
Looking forward to that.
So gonna talk to him about his perspective. So if you're wanting the scoop directly from the horse's mouth, tune in. But yeah, hipstersofthecoast.com. Come out with episodes every Friday.
So again, I'm Joe Dyer. You can find me on at VolrathXP. But you can also find my work on the MTG Goldfish website under the article category This Week in Legacy. Now, granted, I've only got a month's articles under my belt so far on that category. But if you want to read my earlier work, you can also look for Vintage 101 is the other column that I do in relation to the vintage format, if that interests you at all. But primarily, I'm on Twitter.
Sweet.
I'm at RacelinIM on Twitter, but I probably won't see it. I'm also at Thirst for Cast. I'm a part of the Thirst for Knowledge podcast with Lawrence Harmon. We have a great time debating why you should ponder or brainstorm.
That was an excellent episode, by the way.
They do go very deep into the strategy of Legacy. If you guys like that kind of content.
Yeah. Also, life choices. We really
choices.
Maybe you shouldn't listen to the life choices. The Legacy stuff's great.
If you like to be good at Legacy, listen to Thirst for Knowledge. We actually probably will make you.
Y'all can find me on Twitter, Medina_MTG, and there's going to be a ton of links in these show notes. So if you want to get a hold of me, you can click on any of those. If you want to support the podcast, you can support on Patreon by the same name /Medina, MEDINA_MTG. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
Bye.
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 All right, now we got to tell Craig to leave.
Get out of here, Craig.
Yeah, go away, Craig.
Beat it, Craig. We got to do it with a
ended
command.
with crazy talk. You have to end with crazy talk.
Crazy talk.
Crazy talk. I don't know how we
That's
ended that show though.
Yo,
you know what my favorite podcasting ending is when they go, "That's game."